from the rise, fall, and future of FaZe Clan. Would you please welcome Mr. Lee Trink, ladies and gentlemen? And to interview Lee, no stranger to all that matters, Mr. Nicholas Khoo. Good to see you, mate. How are you? You looking well? G'day, Nick. How are you, mate?
Okay, set up like a real professional, Lee. Right, I like that. So today we're going to have I'm moving our angle. A recorded, no holds barred conversation with the man himself, Mr.
No holds
Lee
barred is my
Trink.
favorite version of conversations.
Your only version, maybe.
That's
Yes.
true. You would know.
Lee Trink, former music executive.
Yes.
Now also former CEO of FaZe Clan, right? And for the uninitiated, FaZe Clan was once the most popular esports team in the world.
Yes.
And at some point, also known as the bad boys of gaming.
Probably still.
And as Sean alluded, we were here before.
Many times.
In very different circumstances.
Yes.
Crazy rich gamers. It was
That's
about interviewing teams that had crossed $100 million in value.
Yeah.
The world is quite
How many
different
years
today.
ago was that?
That was quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe before COVID.
Yeah.
The world's quite different today, right? I've met quite a few esports teams who have touched almost 100 million or 100 million in revenue, not just in value.
Yeah.
And you guys almost made it. You were close to 100 million in revenue.
We did a little over 70 million in revenue a couple of years ago.
Yeah. The organizers described this conversation today as a fireside chat. I don't see any fire. So I guess it's either you.
Somehow I find myself
Or
around
me?
fire a lot, but
Okay. No, I'm not talking about the fact that you were fired from your job. No, not talking about that.
not that part.
But no, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about one of us have to bring the fire today. Let's see who's that's gonna be. Okay.
I'm on board.
For the uninitiated in the room, let's just kind of like talk a little bit about the background. Who is FaZe Clan, right? Super popular gamers, usually around the FPS, first-person shooters, very good at doing not just maybe like pro gaming, but like trick shots and all that, and garner a lot of fans, hundreds of millions, at the peak, 400 million fans?
More, I mean, I would say a network of followers. We were like past 500 million at some point.
Past 500 million fans, close to 70 million in revenues and all that. You came in as a music executive, what was it? Was it EMI?
Yeah, I was president of Capitol Records. I ran
Records.
Virgin Records, ran a small label called Lava, and then I had a management company for about 10 years, and that's really how I connected with FaZe. I originally signed the guys to my management company and really became the first kind of business arm. It wasn't a business. It was a brand. It was a big brand within kind of a niche, but it was also something that nobody knew about, right? This was, I first connected with them in 2014.
So you decided that you had too much money, so you gave them some money as an investor, and then they started spending too much. And then you had to come in as adults in the room. Was that the version?
I mean, it wasn't quite like. I mean, look, there's a long version. We only have 25 minutes, but there's a long version. I mean, the reality is, I didn't plan on being CEO. There was somebody that was running the organization that had to be kind of forcibly ejected at one point, and then the biggest investor at the time kind of said, hey, I think you should be CEO. And can I swear up on this stage?
You're recording yourself.
Yeah, that's okay. I swear on my thing all the time. But literally, when they said to me, I don't think so and so should be CEO, you should be. My response was, oh fuck. and the company owed me a fortune of money, and I thought, all right, we were in such jeopardy that I thought, all right, I'm not going to leave it in anybody else's hands. I had put myself in a lot of risk based on the work with the company, and I said, all right, I'm gonna take the gig. So I was kind of drafted into the role. that was in 2018.
I've heard stories like that before. Maybe some people in the room as well. Just put a bit of money, more than a bit of loose change, and after now you have to step in and protect your own money. And it sounds like that's what happened over there. And then you took the company public for $1 billion. At the time you were here on this stage, I think 2 years ago, that the company had hit a valuation of market cap on NASDAQ for $2.5 billion.
Yeah, it was. I think that was in must have been in late 21, early 22. It was. Yeah, the reality is that was a little bit of an artificial number in terms of the float, and not to get into the weeds on Wall Street things, but
we're going to get into weeds.
Yeah, okay, but yeah, technically we passed 2B in valuation. Yeah.
Yeah, past 2B in valuation for esports team, making quite decent, 70 million in revenue. Not a lot of profits, maybe no profits.
No
profits.
It was very expensive to run our operation.
Very expensive. We'll dive more into that. But then I remember like not too long after All That Matters, like 2 years ago, and then the market cap started dropping, and one thing led to the other, and you were fired as CEO. So
yes.
But today you're back.
Well, yes. What made me feel better is reading the Steve Jobs book of him getting fired. Not that I compare myself to him, but it was comforting to see that. And yes, they did come back and ask me to come and advise.
Phenomenal,
So.
Almost mind blowing to me, right? How?
Yeah, it's because some of the people that were involved that drove some of that decision making were not necessarily thinking everything through.
I think the organizers got it wrong. It's not the rise and fall of FaZe Clan. It's the rise and fall of Trink, the comeback kid, the guy who got fired and came back to FaZe Clan.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've always played my hand kind of fast and furious, and I tend to take a lot of risk. I mean, the reality is like I've had 4 different careers at this point, and so risk and making kind of challenging moves, and frankly, fighting with the powers that be is sort of in my DNA.
Talking about 4 different careers, let's sidetrack a little bit. Your first career was as a DPP.
District attorney in
attorney.
Brooklyn. Yeah, prosecutor in Brooklyn.
Right. The last colleague that you had is now running for president.
No.
And
my colleague.
and you went on to run a esports team. But okay, let's take a step back. Some learning, some thoughts on your journey, and especially with FaZe.
Learnings about it.
Yeah, or some thoughts on the journey. Yeah.
I think probably the what I got really a crash course in is what Wall Street is really about, and what the financing world is really about, and what they value and how they move. And frankly, I think the almost predatory nature that Wall Street takes with entrepreneurs. And I think that's if there's anything kind of important as a takeaway for any entrepreneurs that are in the room, or entrepreneurs that are listening, is to be careful about who you take money from, to understand what Wall Street is about. And I think the most important lesson and made me think about my old career, one of my old careers as running a record label. Wall Street are portfolio players, and Wall Street take a number of different bets, and frequently when things get tough, they want to cut and run. Whereas, and that's almost the opposite of an entrepreneur's nature, right? An entrepreneur really accomplishes what they do typically by being persistent, having grit, having tenacity, almost never giving up and looking for that solution regardless. I think the dilemma is if you're in that zone and things, take a wrong turn, right? Like with us, the markets turned before we went public. We had an opportunity to make some different moves, maybe some of which I championed, and the finance guys wanted to push in a certain direction. And the challenge is when things go sideways, if, as portfolio players, they look at it and say, okay, we made all these bets. This one's not working out. We don't want to put any more energy into that, is frequently how kind of one of the Wall Street guys will look at it. Not dissimilar to my old career of a record label. Record label is a portfolio. It's a portfolio of artists. The reality is that if you're doing great, you have 70% are losers, and those 30% pay for the winners. I don't know what the percentage is in Wall Street, but it's the same dynamic. And sometimes you say, hey, you know what? We put in our money, we put in our energy, let's focus on something else. And look, when you're a portfolio player, you're entitled to make that move. The challenge is it really is in direct contravention to the DNA of entrepreneurs who we're kind of built to keep bulldozing, keep looking for a solution. And, if you don't look for the solution, you're not going to find one. But I've often found that if you do, if you put your head down, almost every problem is solvable. And the challenge is if you're misaligned with your financiers, it's gonna create a challenge for the business.
Misalignment seems like a very mild way.
That's me being polite.
I come from private equity in TMT media, and I don't know what you're talking about, right? So sometimes I feel that we're like kittens compared to our bigger brothers on Wall Street. Right.
Yeah.
You use the word predator.
It's and I didn't coin this, but when I heard it, I was like, wow, that really struck a nerve. And
you were warned.
What's that?
You were warned. One of your investors had the name Predator on the company.
I mean, it's true. Probably the biggest challenge that we had is with one particular group. I thought it was irony of having the word predator in their name. I mean, literally in the name of their company. But it was not ironic. And the reality is, when it comes to kind of Wall Street and a lot of investors, they are full-time predators, and you are part-time prey. Because most entrepreneurs launching a company, it's, at a certain point you become a serial entrepreneur, but in general, most of those ventures are with new entrepreneurs that don't have that experience, or maybe don't have capital markets experience. I'd put myself in that category, right? A lot of experience in financing and a lot of things, not in capital markets, learn the hard way.
Full-time predator versus part-time prey.
Yeah.
No chance at all. Zero.
Well, listen, not no chance, but I think what happens is if things get tough, that's when things get squirrely, right? It's like that's the tension that, and ultimately the most important thing I think in terms of taking people's money is really genuinely being aligned in the future. Now, you can try, depends on if people are honest with you, which is also not necessarily the case. I had an experience where I came to find out that one of the financiers telling us and telling me one thing, telling his investors something else, right? Came to learn that later. But look, this is, you want to play big boy, big girl games, you got to deal with big boy, big girl problems.
I like that positive take, just focus on, again, like the entrepreneurial trait, focus on the positives. It was not predator versus prey, it was more alignment issues.
Yeah, I mean, look, tomato, right? Yeah.
But okay, let's stay on a positive note. Switch tempo a little bit.
I'm an optimist. Look, I don't understand a pessimistic entrepreneur. I think that's like an oxymoron. I think you have to be an optimist to be an entrepreneur.
Well said. Well, I see some familiar faces in the room today, and I see some like marketers and all that. Now, on a positive note, you guys did some amazing, I would say, kick-ass marketing partnerships and all of that, right? You had Nike, Sports Illustrated.
I think we did things that shocked us on a daily basis of what we could accomplish. I think we had a long run of all like a consistent drumbeat of shocking ourselves, shocking the gaming world, shocking the non-gaming world in terms of brands and other partnerships. Like, we did things that I think nobody thought were possible, and frankly, they weren't possible until we did them.
Yeah, you had Man City,
Yeah,
Sports
that was an
Illustrated,
early one.
Porsche, Nissan.
We did that. Man City was a strategic alignment. Porsche was we kind of upgraded. We had Nissan as a sponsor, and then at one point we had the opportunity to do Porsche, which was incredible.
Which was your favorite shocking deal? That maybe unpack that for us a little bit, just a little.
Well, look, I think one of the great moments that really kind of encapsulated everything was when we were on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and that was
cover of not Gamer Illustrated, Sports Illustrated.
No, not the cover of Gamer Illustrated, cover of Sports Illustrated. And when we were pitching what that story was, a lot of it was around the redefinition of a team, right? Because look, I think that a lot of people kind of understand that battle, and maybe it's a little bit less so in Asia than it is in America and in Europe around, is it sport? Is gaming sport versus traditional sports? And a legacy brand like Sports Illustrated needed some real convincing to understand what it is. It's not, we had to overcome a lot of preconceived notions around gaming and gamers.
Did it help that you guys were known as the bad boys at some point?
But
you still did those deals.
Well, yeah, it was like we did those deals despite the fact that we were the bad boys. But that was part of the energy of the brand. Like, you couldn't separate the fact that we were the bad boys from why we were so popular. And so you couldn't say, if you sanitized us, you would kind of remove that energy. And look, frankly, some of the battles that I had with my other founders, with the talent co-founders, was around striking that balance. And I'm sure plenty of times, I know they disagreed with me about certain things. Some things they recognized afterwards that I was right, and sometimes they would think, nope, you were still wrong, and they'd be right. The reality is we were inventing the whole thing as it came. I mean, taking kind of a niche, very edgy brand within a gaming space that was ascending and trying to turn it into a meaningful business, drive real revenue, working with real partners. Like, we were figuring it all out, and there were monolithic battles behind the scenes. But I'll talk about one thing. Banks didn't want to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Number one, they didn't understand Sports Illustrated. These are guys that live on digital, right? Like, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. So when we first started talking to them about Sports Illustrated, they weren't that excited. They didn't get it. I mean, I'm still stunned now saying it, and Banks wouldn't, who was like kind of the soul of the brand, wouldn't get on the cover. Now, he deeply regretted it later. He regretted it when that cover came out, and then they saw the power of what it was to take a digitally based gaming brand and merge it with legacy media, and what that did was explosive. And on that cover we had a handful of like the traditional gamers, plus we had Bronny James, LeBron's son, was on the cover. Who's a basketball player now on the Lakers. We also had Kyler Murray, who's the quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals. And then we had our four traditional gamers. And it was unbelievably explosive. And it was a calling card of us entering this kind of new level and entering kind of the zeitgeist and breaking, frankly, the ceiling that had been on gaming forever.
I don't know about the folks in the room, but the lead Trink I just heard sounded more like a savvy marketer, talking about the energy of the brand, like a gamer, talk about mythical battles and all that, and not so much like a district attorney.
Yeah, well, district attorney was a long time ago.
What a transformation. What a transformation. Like 4 careers you mentioned. Okay, I'm watching time. Maybe we wrap up with last two questions. What would you have done differently, especially as CEO of FaZe Clan, taking it public, 1 billion, 2 billion? What would you have done differently?
I'm gonna say something shocking, and it's funny because a lot of people come to me about taking a company public, and they're like, "That's so many people's dream." It was never one of my dreams. I'd never thought about it. Never, it was a vehicle. But truth be told, there were, because the markets had changed before we entered the public market, it was clear to me what would happen. How it would happen, that was debatable. Maybe one day I'll post the speech I gave to the board when I brought kind of an alternate deal before we went public. But I probably would have been more aggressive. Frankly, I mean, it's funny because I think I got fired because of fighting with the board, and
yet you were not aggressive enough.
And right. And my lesson is, and by the way, if I would have done what I I almost don't want to say exactly what I would have done. I'm pretty much sure I would have been fired at that time for doing it, but I think it would have been the right thing to do to take us off that path. I think we were still we were still fledgling in terms of a real business, understanding its model, understanding the risks. Like we were pushed. The way I described it is like we were loaded onto a track, and once we were on that track, you could talk to nobody about what it meant and how to do it, including our own attorneys. I'll leave you with this bit. I so distrusted our own attorneys around the advice that they were giving and questions they refused to answer to me that I hired another attorney to explore avenues. But that to me is the system. There's a system. They load you up, and all they want to do is keep you down on that track. And again, it's the challenge of like the tension between an entrepreneur who wants to make moves, who is a field general, and you have to make decisions in the field. And frankly, the financiers are often in the ivory towers, potentially second guessing your field general, right? So I felt like a field general. Surveying the landscape, seeing what the challenges are, seeing what the opportunities and what we might do, and the ivory tower people didn't want to listen, and so even though I ended up getting fired for being pretty aggressive, I think I wasn't aggressive enough at another time in sticking to what I felt was right. And part of it was my first adventure in this arc of capital markets.
Somehow when you were saying that, the imagery of like 80s cartoons come on, like, right, you get loaded up on the train, strapped in, and you're going against it. Oncoming train coming.
Yeah, it's like the roller coaster.
Make sure he's strapped in before the crash.
That's right. Not for the faint of heart. None of it is for the faint of heart.
Not for the faint of heart. For entrepreneurs. Okay, and we'll end with this last question. Now, you are back at FaZe as an advisor. As an advisor. It's not quite the same as
not at
running
all.
in.
I'm not involved in any
You're not strapped in
operation.
Now. You're not strapped in.
Not at all.
You can always wriggle out. Anytime, just hop out and go for a latte.
No. It's a very
okay.
Yeah.
So if somebody came along tomorrow and said, Lee, we want you back in, go run another esports team as CEO, what would your response be?
I would respectfully decline, and it's not that I don't love the gaming space.
No conflict of interest, whatever.
No, it's not about that. It's. I mean, look, number one, I'm the way I've been talking to myself about my next ventures is I want to do things that are more boring. I've been almost only in exciting, talent-driven career, like except that my time as a prosecutor, and I just think it's really hard it's so much harder to make money in exciting businesses than boring businesses. Now, maybe my version of boring is not the same as what a typical boring is. I think my version of boring is not dealing with kind of the brain damage of talent on a day-to-day basis. And I've been in the talent business almost my whole life, right? And I love talent, and I love the artists and the gamers, and I have tremendous affection and no interest in continuing on that path. I think there are other ways. I think I can take all of the lessons across my 4 different careers and roll them up into the current landscape of what's happening in technology and other, disrupt. I mean, I love anywhere where there's disruption. I love any place that is like not fully formed. I'm good at kind of pulling ideas from different places and repackaging them and driving something new forward. And so, A, I always like to conquer a new mountain, and B, I think I'm at the very least, I need to take a healthy break from the talent business.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I know Lee and I have been on this stage more than a couple of times in the past few years. I almost feel it's the organizers who deliberately do this, like a long-term drama series. K-drama, and
we need to repackage and edit all of the conversations and like do it as an arc. Maybe we'll release that on Netflix or something.
Sorry, if we get to do this again next time, it sounds like we're going to get a more boring Lee Trink. I'm not sure what that version would look like.
God, I hope there's never a boring Lee Trink version of Lee Trink. Don't worry, I'll come up with some zingers either way.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Lee, and join me in thanking him. Thank you.
Thanks all.